WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's 6 p.m. in Dakar and Freetown, 7 p.m. in Abuja. Good evening and welcome to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on WADR.org. Coming up in the news, African Union rejects accusation of Christian genocide in Nigeria, says the continent's security threat is complex.
What's going on in northern part of Nigeria has nothing to do with the kind of atrocities we see in Sudan or in some part of eastern DRC.
Burkina Faso investigates 10 magistrates, including a lawyer, for breach of confidentiality and bias.
Following hearings conducted in October 2025, a vast network of corrupt officials at the Ouagadougou Court of Appeal was revealed.
Nigerian Senate approves over $800 million loan despite weak impact of social spending, and Ghana's Supreme Court gives 1 week deadline in U.S. deportation case. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin with one of the biggest trending news stories today emerging from the United Nations headquarters in New York, where the African Union has rejected Christian genocide in Nigeria. Mohammed Ali Yusuf, chair of the African Union Commission, told a press conference on Wednesday that there is no genocide in northern Nigeria. Yusuf's comment adds to the list of personalities and regional institutions that have spoken after U.S. President Donald Trump claimed that Christians were being slaughtered by jihadists and faced an existential threat. Recall, Trump this month threatened to carry out an armed intervention in Nigeria if the government does not stem the killings. The complexity of the situation in northern Nigeria should push us to think twice before making such statements, the AU chairperson said.
There is no genocide in northern Nigeria. We have issued a communique making clear that what's going on in northern part of Nigeria has nothing to do with the kind of atrocities we see in Sudan or in some part of eastern DRC. I think the complexity of the situation in northern Nigeria should, push us think twice before, declaring such statements. The first victims of Boko Haram are Muslims, not Christians. The first victims. I'm saying it with documented references. So the complexity in the northern part of Nigeria should not be taken, that easily. So what we are saying to those statements, with regard to those statements, is that the African continent is very complex. It's not that easy to describe those situations with such very easy words that can be used in a not reasonable way. That's why the African Union Commission are very clear about that. We made it clear in our statement and communique. And we would like really to stress again that there is no genocide in northern Nigeria.
Mohammed Ali Yusuf is a chairperson of the African Union Commission. Meanwhile, the United Nations has warned that acute food insecurity is worsening in Nigeria and 15 other global hunger hotspots. The situation puts millions at risk of famine between November 2025 and May 2026. According to a joint FAO-WFP report titled Hunger Spots, countries of very high concern include Afghanistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo DRC, Myanmar, Nigeria, Somalia, and Syria. The report also highlights Haiti, Mali, Palestine, South Sudan, Sudan, and Yemen as facing an imminent risk of catastrophic hunger. It cites conflict, economic shocks, and extreme weather conditions as key drivers, warning that failing humanitarian funding could worsen the crisis. Burkina Faso, Chad, Kenya, and the Rohingya refugee situation in Bangladesh are also flagged as needing urgent attention. In Nigeria, the Senate Chamber of the National Assembly has approved President Bola Tinubu's request to borrow from the nation's domestic market. Tinubu's request for over 1 trillion naira or $693 million, is to help cover part of the budget deficit for 2025. However, this decision comes amid a new World Bank report that raises concerns about the effectiveness of government spending in reducing poverty. From Abuja, Usman Umar reports.
The approval followed the adoption of a report by the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debt, which noted that total spending outlined in the 2025 Appropriation Act amounts to 60 trillion naira or $42 billion. This represents an increase of 5.25 trillion naira, equivalent to $3.7 billion compared to the previous proposal. As a result, the deficit has risen to 14.1 trillion naira, roughly $9.9 billion, of which 12.95 trillion naira has already been approved for borrowing. The Senate's latest approval aims to fill the remaining gap through domestic borrowing. Senator Jibrin Barrow is the Deputy Senate President.
Recommendation 1, that the Senate do approve Mr. President's request to establish a 1 trillion 150 billion naira borrowing program in the domestic debt market to close the unfunded deficit gap created by the increase in the budget size over and above the prior approved revenue and borrowing plans.
However, a new World Bank report titled "The State of Social Safety Nets in Nigeria" reveals that the country's social protection programs have had minimal impact on poverty reduction, decreasing it by just 0.4 percentage points. Despite various initiatives such as conditional cash transfers and school feeding programs, which the latest borrowings will finance, the World Bank blames poor design and benefit dilution for their weak impact. It further notes that Nigeria's allocation to social protection averaged only 0.45% of GDP between 2010 and 2021, rising slightly to 0.7% in 2019, still below regional averages. As Nigeria resorts to domestic borrowing again, lawmakers stress the need for transparency and improved targeting of social spending to ensure that debt-funded programs genuinely benefit citizens. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we stream live at wadr.org and on YouTube and Facebook live at WADR English. Let's now take you to the Sahel, precisely Niger, where the power of Prime Minister Ali Mohamed Lamin Zein has been enhanced. He will now coordinate government actions. The decision was contained in a decree issued by Niger's transitional president, General Abdurrahman Chani. Imoredet completes the story.
The Prime Minister, who also serves as the Minister of Economy and Finance, will now be responsible for coordinating government actions. This change was announced in a decree signed by Transitional President General Abdurrahman Chani. However, Nigerian economist Sambali Dodo believes this decision will grant the Prime Minister more authority.
The aim is to give the Prime Minister the necessary power to have oversight of all actions that the various technical ministries are called up to carry out.
Meanwhile, Salifu Ibrahim Bako, a political analyst and president of the Niger Union Federation, describes General Chani's decision as an essential move for the rebuilding of Niger.
We must take action so that everyone respects the established order. In a state or in a republic, if there is a failure of the exercise of power, we will witness disorder. Someone will not obey someone, and that makes no sense.
Niger's Prime Minister Ali Mohamed Lamin Zein is now tasked with coordinating administrative, economic, financial, and social affairs of the state. He now has hierarchical authority over all government ministers.
A report by WADR's Niamey correspondent Murtala Zuberu and voiced by Imoredet. Still in the Sahel, 10 magistrates and a lawyer in Burkina Faso are under investigation for breach of confidentiality and bias. This information was made public by CORAC, the organization responsible for defining, monitoring, and overseeing the implementation of the country's strategic policies. In its press statement on Wednesday, CORAC revealed a case of corruption and money laundering involving customs officers. Christopher Tejo tells us more.
On national television last Wednesday night, Korak spokesperson Captain Farouk Sogo reviewed instances of corruption within the customs service.
Customs officials in Burkina Faso are alleged to have committed acts of corruption and money laundering, demanding payment from truck drivers to allow trucks to pass despite regular clearance at the Wadr Inter-Customs Office.
The event dates back to May 2021 and involved 13 officers. The judicial investigation was launched to address allegations of corruption and money laundering. However, the case was dismissed in July 2024. In August 2025, an appeal was filed, but the dismissal was upheld by the investigating chamber. Additionally, the accused gained access to documents revealing the identities of witnesses and other elements of the case file. Captain Soko stated that individuals within the judicial system were implicated in this matter.
Following hearings conducted in October 2025, a vast network of corrupt officials at the Ouagadougou Court of Appeal was revealed. 10 magistrates, including a presiding judge, a public prosecutor, and a lawyer, are implicated. Significant sums of money were also involved in acts of corruption and influence peddling that led to a biased investigation and a partisan judgment in the case.
The Korak spokesperson asserts that these individuals will be prosecuted for breach of confidentiality and bias in a judicial investigation.
A report from WADR's Ouagadougou correspondent Martin Kaba and presented to you by Christopher Aticho. In Mali, the Episcopal Bishop Conference has cancelled the 54th annual pilgrimage to Kita, which was scheduled from November 29 to 30, 2025. The bishops explained that the cancellation is due to the ongoing fuel shortage in the country caused by a blockade imposed by the GNIM on hydrocarbon imports. Despite the cancellation, they encourage Christian faithful to pray for peace in Mali. Crossing over to Côte d'Ivoire, where around 90,000 refugees who escaped violence in Burkina Faso are receiving humanitarian assistance. This initiative, launched by the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, aims to support asylum seekers, refugees and host communities in northern Côte d'Ivoire. By implementing this support, ECOWAS seeks to demonstrate that the regional solutions are being put in place to address the situation effectively. Augustine Kole has more.
ECOWAS is contributing over $1 million to support this humanitarian initiative. Dr. Sintiki Tafa Hugbe, ECOWAS Director of Humanitarian Affairs, stated that these funds will be used for various purposes, including distributing food to host families, constructing water pumps, and producing passports. As part of its support, the Ivorian government has established 2 reception centers in Bukani and Choloko, located in the northern region of the country. However, the majority of displaced persons are being assisted by host families in villages. Since July 2, 2025, the Ivorian government has recognized refugee status, which provides additional protection and aims to facilitate the voluntary return of refugees to their home country once their situation is stabilized. This support from ECOWAS comes just weeks before the conclusion of activities at the UNHCR's multi-country office. Olivia Beer, the head of the UNHCR's multi-country office, welcomed this act of solidarity, emphasizing that it reinforces the state's role in protecting refugees. He also highlighted ECOWAS' efforts in providing similar assistance to other countries affected by the influx of refugees fleeing the crisis in the Central Sahel.
Augustine Kole reporting there. In Ghana, the Supreme Court has given a 1-week deadline for the Attorney General of the Federation and Democracy Hub, a non-governmental organization, to submit arguments in the controversial U.S. deportation Memorandum of Understanding case. In recent weeks, several human rights activists and NGOs have denounced the migrant deportation agreement between Accra and Washington. In early September, 14 West African migrants were returned to their countries of origin through Ghana. Since then, reports have surfaced that 60 migrants have been transported to Ghana and are currently living in inhumane conditions. From Accra, Nadiri Tete reports.
The directive follows a sitting of a 5-member panel of the Apex Court on Wednesday, presided over by Justice Gabriel Scott Puamang. The court said the written submissions would help clarify the issues before it, noting that the documents presented so far had not adequately assisted the understanding of the case. It has set November 26, 2025 to deliver a ruling on the plaintiff's application for discovery, after which an injunction request will be considered. Deputy Attorney General Dr. Justice Rimsai told the court that the state was uncertain about the exact nature of the reliefs being sought by the applicant, a view the panel shared. But lead plaintiff Oliver Baka-Vomawo explained that Democracy Hub had filed 2 applications, one seeking discovery and another for an interlocutory injunction, stressing that the matter was urgent. The civil society group is accusing government of entering into what it calls a secret and unconstitutional memorandum of understanding with the United States to deport West African nationals into Ghana. Through its lawyers, Merton and Everett LLP, the group argues that the alleged deal violates Ghana's 1992 constitution and the country's international commitment under conventions such as the Refugee Convention and Convention Against Torture. Democracy Hub claims that under the said agreement, 42 individuals have already been forcibly repatriated into Ghana and detained under armed guard at the Bundasi military training camp without charge or access to legal representation, an act it describes as unlawful and degrading. The group is asking the Supreme Court to declare the agreement unconstitutional, null and void, and to restrain the government from implementing it. For WADR, Nadiri Tete, Accra.
You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and across the world at wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. African Union AU rejects accusation of Christian genocide in Nigeria, says the continent's security threat is complex. Burkina Faso investigates 10 magistrates, including a lawyer, for breach of confidentiality and bias. Nigerian Senate approves over 800 million loan despite weak impact of social spending, and Ghana's Supreme Court gives 1-week deadline in U.S. deportation case. Still in the news, here in Senegal, reactions trail new power struggle between President Diomaye Faye and Prime Minister Sonko. We also have the guest interview and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. Here in Senegal, a new power struggle between President Bassirou Diomaye Faye and his Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko is generating notable reactions. The conflict began with Senegalese president's decision to replace Aïdjan Bosch with Aminata Touré as the head of the Diomaye presidential coalition that helped him come to power. This decision was swiftly rejected by the ruling PASTEF party. In a statement, the political party asserted that the Senegalese head of state does not have the authority to dismiss Aïdjan Bosch, who was appointed by the Conference of Leaders. For political analyst Mamadou Sy Albert, this disagreement at the highest levels of government reflects the president's desire to assert his authority.
The
President of the Republic currently lacks a political apparatus. He knows a divergence is looming with PASTEF because the fundamental debate between PASTEF and the President revolves around 2 major issues: justice and PASTEF's role in the functioning of the state. This is the real point of contention. The President realizes that if he doesn't reposition himself within the alliance, he risks losing everything. And I think PASTEF's allies remain loyal to PASTEF. However, there are new allies within the foundation who are much closer to the President than to PASTEF. It's a game of alliances. The President's alliance is not the alliance of the past. All the tension stems from this. The President is suspected of turning his back on the project, of not fully pursuing justice, of not fully exercising state control as in the past. In any case, the seeds of a political crisis are sown. Now, there's the other major question, the National Assembly. If the Socialist Party were to withdraw from both the coalition and the government, while still holding a majority in the Assembly, there will likely be a conflict between the Assembly and the head of state.
Il y aura probablement un conflit entre l'Assemblée et le chef de l'exécutif.
Mamadou C. Albert is a Senegalese political analyst.
Politics,
Analysis on major news.
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Our guest segment this evening takes us back to Ghana, where the Supreme Court has given a 1-week deadline for the Attorney General of the Federation and Democracy Hub to submit arguments in the controversial U.S. deportation Memorandum of Understanding case. Speaking of WADR, Olivier Baka-Vomao, the lead counsel for Democracy Hub, asserts that the agreement is shrouded in secrecy, while the fundamental rights of the West African nations are abused by the government.
Yesterday, the 12th of November, we appeared in court in connection with our application for the government to be compelled to disclose the agreement. Our case is simple, that if the Attorney General continues to deny that this is an agreement that violates international law or Ghanaian constitution, that it follows that the court must have a look and have a say ultimately. So that's the position that we have held before the court so far. Now, that being said, the whole issue has to be contextualized in terms of, one, the implementation of the agreement. So many people have been brought in the country. Our count is that it is somewhere around 61 people that have been brought in connection with this agreement, that several of the individuals have been held in conditions that violate international law and violate Ghanaian human rights law, that we have, in this connection, filed also another application enforcing the human rights. We have raised issues in the way in which Ghana has continued to proceed in dealing with West African nationals. So our hope is that when we return, the court has given the 26th of November, that the court would not only order the release of the agreement publicly, but also enjoins the Republic from continuing to implement this agreement.
You're saying that it is unconstitutional, first because it did not get the ratification of Parliament before these people were brought in. But one would argue that on the basis of humanitarian grounds, can't this pass?
The question is, where is the humanitarian basis in this conversation? And I know that the Minister of Foreign Affairs has suggested and weaponized this agreement that Ghana is in fact being the humanitarian in this case. But that is not true. In fact, the humanitarian basis in this conversation would entail that the government would not even sign this agreement. Because what the government is doing is that even though U.S. courts have granted protection against the removal of these persons under the Convention Against Torture and also under U.S. immigration refugee laws, the government has gone to sign an agreement that violates both U.S. law, violates Ghanaian law, and violates international refugee and human rights and humanitarian laws to receive the people, keep them in military detention under heavy armed guard, and subjecting them to conditions that do not align with their dignity.
Are you also privy to the records of some of these individuals?
So we have been able to establish about 55% of them. And we have documentation in terms of all the court orders that have been received. Others, the government is not providing access. We filed a right to information request demanding information on the persons that have been received into the country, the circumstances that they have been received. The government is refusing to disclose this. Now, the government has come out, in fact, and said that in the agreement with the U.S., none of the persons that are supposed to be received into Ghana are persons with any kind of criminal record whatsoever. So we know pure and pure that these are not persons who are being deported out of the U.S. for any criminal reasons, that these are people who are in fact asylum seekers in the U.S. who have been removed in connection with immigration politics that is happening in the U.S.
Ghana in recent times seems to be in the good books of the U.S. Is this one of the factors that you think is actually underpinning Ghana's good relations, or seems to be in the good books of the U.S., particularly under the Donald Trump administration?
Our responsibility as a country is to be in compliance with Ghanaian constitutional law and also international law. That we are not to enter into any kinds of shady agreements as the government has entered into, in order that it will be on the good side of a U.S. government that has shown very little respect for international law. The reputation of Ghana as being a country that is democratic is upheld. We are going to sign an agreement that uses humans as pawns for visa restrictions to be lifted. This is completely unacceptable. This flies in the face of the foreign minister's claim that Ghana has continued to be and will be a shining example for Pan-Africanism. You don't sacrifice your fellow Africans.
Olivier Baka Vomao is the lead counsel for Democracy Hub Ghana. Big news from the Super Eagles camp. All outstanding bonuses and allowances have now been cleared by the Nigerian Football Federation, NFF. Captain William Troost Ekon confirmed the update on his X handle, saying, and I quote, "Issue resolved. Outstanding financials cleared, and on the ground, team is united and focused on representing Nigeria with our maximum for the games ahead." End of quote. That means full focus now shifts to today's crucial 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifier against Gabon as the Eagles look to strengthen their campaign. Meanwhile, in another World Cup news, the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, is adding extra motivation, promising a $1 million bonus to each player if they reach the Intercontinental Playoffs. President Felix Tshisekedi himself has backed the move to fire up the team, who face Cameroon in their first playoff clash this Thursday. Plenty of drama, pride and World Cup dreams in the air this week. And with that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Falilisu and Maojo Juf for the technical support. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WADR English. We stream live at wadr.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a replay of WADR's environment program Enviroscope, focusing on the effects of deforestation on local communities. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good evening.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County,
Radio Kagama 94.5 FM, Niba County, DCN Radio 91.3 FM, Riverside County, Wakat FM Radio, Banga, Liberia, Radio Baf FM 91.3 Sierra Leone in Nigeria, and Love 104.5 FM Abuja.
For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.